House Republicans demanding answers from the CDC this morning to explain the CDC's COVID guidelines for children, especially the mask requirements for kids 2 years and older. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise writing this to the CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. The CDC is undermining its own credibility as it continues to jeopardize an entire generation's development. Joining me right now is Louisiana Congressman, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks very much for being here this morning. I was struck today reading that they want to get regular approval and emergency use approval for a vaccine for kids as young as 6 months old, Congressman. 6 months to 5-year-olds. They're talking about the vaccine and, of course, masks as well.
Yeah, Maria, it's good to be with you, but it's really concerning to see how the CDC continues. They've changed so many times on how kids have to be kind of managed in schools by each school system. And look, there are a lot of school systems across America that have been doing just fine by having the kids in the classroom without masks. There are all kind of studies out there, and there's a lot of science that shows that kids are being harmed, not only by being kept out of the classroom, but also by having to wear masks at such a young age. It hurts their ability to learn, even reading the facial expressions of teachers, seeing their fellow classmates. And so when you look, Los Angeles is a great example. Over the weekend, the mayor of Los Angeles can be hanging out at a football game without a mask, but a 6-year-old has to have a mask. People know this isn't science. It's political science. It's surely not medical science, but they're doing real long-term damage to our kids. Nobody's studying that over at CDC. All they do is continue to put out these mandates. And in certain areas, it's done. And in certain areas, it's not done. And where they're not mandating masks, the kids are doing fine and they're learning better.
Well, I think you make such an important point because it feels like we really are putting our kids at a disadvantage. For all of the reasons that you mentioned, you know, you don't think about the impact of having your half of your face covered. But these kids are learning important things at a young age where you don't see facial expressions. What do you think will be the impact of our young people in 10 years, for example, when they're out looking for jobs and trying to launch their own careers?
I worry about this a lot because, again, there is already science and studies that show the damage that's been done to kids just in the last 2 years. And so if you know this, if you know, you've got a lot of examples out there of states and local school systems that got open quickly and did not mandate masks versus the ones that closed down, went virtual, and mandated masks. And the kids in the classroom without masks are doing dramatically better. And we're going to look back on this years later, like you suggested, and say, who let this happen? That's why we're fighting so hard to reverse these mandates. Many European countries have dropped the mandates because they know it's hurting kids. And at some point, we've seen President Biden's been in a position for over a year now. Are you going to side with the teacher union bosses or with kids? But you've got to pick a side. You can't be with both because the union bosses are doing and pushing these mandates that are hurting kids. And Biden will not stand with America's kids. We're standing with America's kids. Jamie Comer and I wrote that letter saying, go follow the science. And by the way, point out what kind of damage is being done to the kids in the classroom or out of the classroom with these masks on versus kids that don't have to wear the masks.
Congressman, I want to switch gears and ask you about the business in the House of the Representatives, because I know that Speaker Nancy Pelosi canceled a bipartisan committee on China. And I want to know why, given 1 million Americans are dead from COVID-19, why House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has not held one hearing on the origins of this pandemic. I spoke with Peter Schweitzer over the weekend after he wrote the book Red-Handed and explained all of the conflicts of interest where leading Congress people as well as Joe Biden, our president, has accepted money. His son has accepted money from the CCP, and I'm wondering if there's a conflict here. Here's Peter Schweitzer this weekend. Watch this.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Nancy Pelosi used to be a hawk on China, and then something happened in the late 2000s. Her husband started doing deals in China. He was a partner investor in a investment firm. He held about a $10 million stake in that firm that was investing in mainland China. He was involved with 2 limousine companies. Remember the 2008 Beijing Olympics? Nancy Pelosi initially supported a boycott, but when 2 limousine companies that her husband owned part of got contracts to ferry VIPs around the Beijing Olympics in 2008, she changed her position. Her son also, Paul Pelosi Jr., has also sought deals in mainland China. So this is a problem. Yeah. And again, she may ding them occasionally on the Uyghurs, but on the big important things like exposing COVID, she has not allowed a single congressional hearing on that subject in the last 2 years.
So, Congressman, what's the story? Is Nancy Pelosi and her family accepting money from the CCP as well? Is that why you all have not had one hearing on the origins of COVID-19?
I don't know about that, Maria, but it's been incredibly alarming that both President Biden and Speaker Pelosi are so soft on China, especially looking into the origins of COVID. There are scientists across the political spectrum who have said now, if you look at the genome spectrum of COVID, it is not naturally occurring. It wasn't a bat to an animal to a human. It was likely started in that lab in Wuhan. In fact, Jamie Comer and I had a hearing on that because no Democrat would hold a hearing. They're running Congress. So we said, let's have our own hearing. And we asked scientists to come, and a number did. We invited Dr. Fauci. Interestingly, he would not participate. But the scientists who came said COVID probably did start in that lab in Wuhan. And so these are questions that need to be asked. And by the way, if it did happen in that lab, not naturally occurring, don't we want to know about it? Don't we want to know about whether or not China lied for months, vital months that could have saved lives all across the world? These questions will be asked when we're in the majority, Maria.
Are you going to investigate this when you take the majority? If you take the majority, are you going to investigate Fauci? Are you going to investigate how this started?
We've already said things like the origins of COVID will absolutely be investigated. Gain of function research, were American taxpayer dollars involved in coming up with and developing COVID-19 in that lab in Wuhan through gain of function research. Okay. These are all questions scientists are asking. We're surely going to be asking those if we're in the majority. Why Pelosi won't is beyond me.
Yeah, it's beyond us as well. Congressman, it's good to see you. We'll be following this for sure, and we will keep a spotlight on it. Steve Scalise, thank you, sir.
Great being with you. Thanks.